Never felt more awkward.
Check one, two.
Never. Well, are we ready? Okay.
We're on the set. I feel like we're on it.
Okay, let's get started. So, good evening. Thank you for coming. We're back in person. As awkward as this might feel, it's very different, and I think really nice to be able to shake people's hands and welcome them in person. But we do have people in the virtual land watching us tonight, or at least us up here. So, my name's Russ Aceto. And I am the Fairbanks House Counselor. I've been the Fairbanks House Counselor for the last 28 years. And what makes it really interesting this year is I have a 10th grader in the building. And so next year I'm going to be sitting out there and kind of, I think Sarah will be running the show. And I'm a little nervous about that. Bottom line for tonight, I think the message we want to get out there is that the post-CVU plan we don't like to see is no plan. We feel like there's a school for everybody. I was sitting in my school counselor's office, I'm not going to say how many years ago, reviewing my PSAT scores like I was doing with a student this evening. And my school counselor told my mom and I that your 960 SAT score was not going to get you into college, and you might want to consider trade school because you weren't smart enough. Pretty much verbatim. Whoa, that's different. Mm-hmm. So I come in this building every day trying really hard not to be Richard Hayhurst. It always amuses me, the people that stick with you. I might not be the best school counselor, but as long as I'm not Richard Hayhurst, that's a good thing. Your school counselors want to meet with all the juniors. I've met with a few of mine already to help start the college search process. When I was talking with Sarah and planning out tonight, she said, are you going to give your usual like goofy movie quote in relation to all of this? So with or without test scores, you're going to find a home and do amazing things. Don't rely on the sorting hat to place you where it wants. Take control, be in charge of your process, and tell it where you want to go. So, the agenda for tonight, ooh, that makes the paper sounds very weird tonight. We're going to have a very different format. In the past, we have posed a series of questions to all our panelists, and they've responded, and we've kind of covered a lot of information in a very surface way. We're going to try to cover fewer topics, but a little bit more in depth. So you all have some exemplar essays, some letters of recommendation, perhaps some transcripts. You all have things that will be referenced in what we are going to talk about tonight. So we're going to kind of keep most topics to about 15 minutes. That'll get us through our agenda. And so, like I said, we are streaming, as my dad calls it, on the YouTubes. So we are on screen. If we have any students who shouldn't be on screen, just be mindful of that. All right. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. I'm going to go over here to my right with my colleague.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Sarah O'Hare Hughes. I'm one of the school counselors. I work in the Chittenden House. Thanks so much for coming out. I am excited to welcome our guests here, our panelists who are college reps at different colleges. And just a little bit about myself. I am, on a personal note, I'm a parent of a senior, so at CVU. So I have that parent perspective this year, and I think it's been really helpful. And getting to feel all the emotions involved and going through the process with her has been exciting, and also I've learned a lot. I also have a 10th grader coming up as well. So looking forward to hearing from our reps, and kind of they're going to answer some questions that we have created that hopefully will guide the application process and give you some pretty solid information. So I'm going to let the reps introduce themselves. We'll start over here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brandon Kennedy. I'm one of the Associate Directors of Admission at Vermont State University. This is my 12th year in admissions, and I work primarily with our admission counselors that work with undergraduate programs across the state of Vermont, but also our early college and dual enrollment programming. So I've worked with a lot of different high school students. When I was an admission counselor, I traveled and recruited for students all across the country, but mostly Vermont students. So I've worked with your lovely counselors here at CVU for a really long time, and I'm very familiar. So really glad to be here tonight.
Hi, I'm Mason Winter. I'm an assistant director of admissions at St. Lawrence University, which is located in Canton, New York, about 3 hours west of here, and actually where Sarah went to college. I recruit students here in Vermont and in Eastern Massachusetts. This is actually my first year working in admissions, and this is my first college panel like this that I've gone to be a panelist at. So thank you all for having me.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Moses Murphy, Executive Director of Admissions at the University of Vermont. I've worked exclusively at the University of Vermont in admissions. This is my 22nd year, and spent most of that, working with Vermont students. I think early on covered some other parts of New England. Of course, over that those couple of decades, I've worked with a lot of students around the country, but have always centered a lot of the work I've done in Vermont, and have enjoyed that. I'm a born and raised Vermonter myself, and have always appreciated the sort of the ties that the state has with the University of Vermont, and look forward to providing any insight into this process that I can, and answering any questions that you have. So looking forward to it.
Good evening. My name is Sam Prouty. I'm Executive Director of Admissions at Middlebury. I lobbied for this to be back in person, and I assured Russ that, it's the CVU crowd. I mean, they're dying to do this. You're going to have hundreds. So thank you for being
the loyal folks.
Thank you for being the
are
dozens
here.
that have, or the dozen who have shown up. Maybe next year we'll hit the hundreds. This is my 26th year in education. I spent the first bit of it in college admissions at Swarthmore in Pennsylvania, which is where I went to school. Then I was a high school teacher and school counselor for quite a bit of time, and came back to this world. So I've been at Middlebury for about 12 years.
And on screen, we have Connor Sullivan from RIT, my father's alma mater.
Virtually. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I am probably the farthest university away from the high school, so nonetheless excited to be here. My territories include Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, so I will be out there in the area in the spring if you guys have anything, but very excited to be here, very excited to answer any questions that the students have.
All right, and we have a no phone policy at the school, but I'm going to get out my phone, and I'm going to try and keep us on track for 15 minutes per topic. All right, Sarah.
All right. And I just want to add that we will definitely be making time for audience questions. So definitely hold on to your questions if you have them, and we'll be making time for us to answer those questions.
Can you go to the second slide, Gary?
So I'm going to ask the panelists some questions about applications, and then panelists just feel free to chime in and answer questions that work for you. So I'm going to start with the first one. How many applications do you personally read each year?
Thousands. So at Vermont State University, we review on a committee basis. We have admission counselors that do first reviews, which is fantastic because it allows our admission counselors to establish really close relationships with students that are interested in specific academic programs. And then we have a second and a third read, and I do the third reads. So I get to read about a third of our applicant pool is what I read every year, which will be I'll read probably around 2,000 applications this year.
I probably read some of the smallest amount of applications of the bunch up here because I'm one of, as Brandon alluded to, one of those people who first reads most of my applications. I first read about 500 or so applications of the approximately 6,000 students who apply to St. Lawrence, and then we'll occasionally look at some other people's applications as well.
So I think the nature of this question is to give you all a sense of both the kind of volumes that we're dealing with, but also give us an opportunity to talk about the care we take in the review process. I don't do a lot of first reads anymore. I spend most of my time in committee making final decisions. Our top readers will read around 1,200 applications. We of course have a probably a larger staff than most, but every application will go through a multi-step process. And end with a committee, a group of people, and there's several different types of committees. It might depend on the major you've applied to. It will depend on if you're a resident or a non-resident. And then there's also committees that deal with special populations and unusual circumstances. But I think all of us would agree that while we read a lot of applications, that we take great care in sort of this holistic review process that we go through. And make sure that the effort you put into the application is sort of rewarded in our review process.
Yeah, I would, as I do on every panel I sit on, I agree with Moses entirely. At Middlebury, we read in pairs, which is kind of cool. So we actually read the files in real time with a colleague together, and every pair has to read 60 a day for sort of the reading season. So the cool part of the job, and why I've done it for so long, is that literally every 7 to 10 minutes you get a new life story to read about, and you don't know what's coming. And so every 7 to 10 minutes, you laugh out loud, and the next one makes you cry, and the next one makes you sleep, and it's really the nature of it is that you're constantly getting a new story. So my message to you all is to think about that, right? To think about how you present yourself and how you're going to write your application, how you're going to package sort of, your activities and so forth, and just think, somebody that I'll never meet is going to spend 7 to 10 minutes on this, and am I going to have their full attention for 7 to 10 minutes?
Connor?
That being said, I do read a lot of applications. We read by program, but we are also on a committee style reading process. So I read by program. Last year I read around 1,700 by myself. This year I'm facing for just a little bit more than that. And I agree with every other panelist here. It's very, very exciting to read everybody's background and see where you're coming from, regardless of the program.
And a second kind of follow-up to that, what makes an application stand out?
Start with Connor.
I would say what makes it stand out, and to touch on it, is the essay. Your personal life, your awards that you've won, what clubs you're a part of, your story, really. And that's what I like to kind of gravitate towards of having trouble with an application, is where is the student coming from and who they are outside of the classroom. It's really the most interesting piece to me.
My favorite part's always the essay. I know in your packets you have some examples tonight. Something that can be kind of fun to do as you're drafting your essays, students, is before you draft the whole thing, just write down like 10 versions of a first line and test them out, right? Your family's, whatever, Labor Day cookout, and just see which ones grab you, right? And so even tonight, I go to my friend's philosophy club mostly for the goldfish. Does that make you want to keep reading? I don't know. But to me, that the personal statement is by far the most interesting part. That's where you come alive. That's where you tell your story. That's where your voice is at its purest. And so I definitely encourage you to write with a voice, and write with a personality, and write in a way that makes it feel like you're talking to me over coffee rather than, writing a formal document. I think the more that you can come alive and sound and feel like you, the more you're going to stand out.
I would have to agree. My favorite part is the essay. The thing that stands out the most, I think, can vary from applicant to applicant, depending on their circumstances, depending on sort of the individual nature of their candidacy. It could be the strength of their schedule and their academic performance. It could be the leadership and extracurricular activities that they've undertaken. But far and away, the thing that I think is most interesting and the part that makes every application different and therefore makes this process less redundant is that essay or optional essay depending on what the school requires. So but know that each student has a different journey, and what stands out for each of those students can vary for sure.
Yeah, I think for me, like echoing what they said, the essays are something that, like, when you read a really good essay, it sticks with you because it allows you to see a little bit more into like who the applicant is as a person than you really get from a transcript, which is a bunch of courses and a bunch of letters and numbers following it. They can tell you that a student like is doing really well academically, but not necessarily as much about like who they are as an individual, and that's what I really like about reading personal essays.
I'm going to go a little bit different because we've talked a lot about the essays. And at Vermont State, for most of our applicants, we don't require an essay. So those that send essays are always exciting to read and to get to know the student. It adds a little bit of depth and character. But something that oftentimes stands out to me is also demonstrated interest with us. Like, I love to see when a student's come to visit, if they've been to an open house, if they've been to if they've met us at a college fair, things like that, because that shows, not only have they made an impression on us, have they found us somewhere, but they've also maybe repeated. Maybe they've been a few times. That, to me shows that a student's really interested. And, that's another way that now that the essay is optional, that we glean, who the person is. That's kind of the fun part of my job at Vermont State is, since the essay is optional, how do we glean who the student is and how do we find that? And sometimes it requires us to pick up the phone and call the student and say, hey, looking over your application right now and wondering about your grades here, wondering about, this extracurricular activity. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? And having that personal connection is something that I really enjoy doing as well, too.
So we're talking about different parts of the application, and the essay being one of them. We're going to talk a little bit about test scores or sending in test scores. And then, so we have a question about test optional. What does the word test optional mean? You'll see that for many colleges. And curious if you can answer one of you can answer what test optional means.
I wish I went to school in a test optional era. My 960 might not have mattered so much.
It wouldn't have at our school, right? So we're test optional. Again, for most of our programs, some of our programs have the asterisks with them that you need to either take an AccuPlacer or a placement test for us. But for most of our programs, we're completely test optional. And for us, what that means is that if you choose to submit those test scores, we'll look at them. If you choose to not submit those test scores, we're going to assume you didn't take the test, and we're not going to look for them. I think every part of the application gleans a little bit more information about who you are, maybe your academic history. I always like to think of test scores as they're not the end all be all, right? You can go and sit for the SATs. When I was a student, I took them the day after Halloween, which was probably not a great day for me. First off, I hated taking tests. Secondly, wasn't in the best, didn't get the most amount of sleep, right? And so I didn't do well on the tests. I wasn't expecting to do well on the tests. But that was just one snapshot, right? The tests, SATs, ACTs, AP scores are a snapshot in time, right? But they do, in some cases, give us more information, especially for institutions or programs that are a little bit more selective. When you're trying to look for reasons why your applicant pool is slightly different, maybe one applicant is a little bit more elevated over another, they can really glean that for some places. Others, like more for Vermont State University, it's less relevant for us. But we do always value when students choose to send them, but they're not required. They're not used for scholarship purposes for us. I always tell students, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, so I'll let my other colleagues go as well too. But a piece of advice I'd give is ask your admission counselor what test optional means for them, because in some cases, test optional if you choose to not submit your test scores, you might not be able to be considered for all of their merit scholarship. And if you want to be considered for all merit scholarship, don't leave anything off the table, right? Show everything that you can. So I always tell students, test optional is great, but always try to read the asterisks or read the fine print on that as well.
Yeah, so at St. Lawrence, we've been test optional since 2005. But this past year, we instituted a new policy where we have a no harm view on testing. So when students submit scores, if we don't think it will be beneficial to their application or to their merit scholarship award, we will just pretend we didn't see their scores. So for us, test optional is really, we encourage students to submit scores now because it can never hurt them in the process, but they're not required as part of that process. That's very different than a lot of schools, so that's why it's worth checking in with an admissions counselor at a particular school about what test optional means for them and if they would recommend potentially submitting your scores.
Go down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of a lot of what we will say tonight will come down to this sort of takeaway. Make sure you're doing your research about what individual school policies are. You've heard test optional. You've heard no harm. There's test blind, test choice, which is like, you can submit an AccuPlacer or an AP score. And so each school will have different policies, and they may have different policies based on program, based on scholarship, based on honors college. To the original question, I think if a school is saying test optional, they mean truly optional, meaning that you are not at a disadvantage by not submitting test scores. There's no assumptions made if you don't submit test scores. And so I would hope that would be sort of an understanding of trust that we would have, amongst ourselves, is when a school is saying test optional, that's what they mean. And there are stats you can dig into to look at that. So the University of Vermont is test optional. The majority of the students that apply test optional. The majority of the students we admit are test optional. The majority of the students that enroll are test optional. And so it kind of plays out in the data that there is not a built-in disadvantage. It's really about picking what you think best highlights, again, your candidacy and best represents your academic ability, which in some cases for some students is not, their standardized test scores.
Middlebury's test optional. I agree with everything that's been said. Don't sweat it. If a school is test optional, there is no secret conspiracy. Like if I don't submit my tests, are they just going to assume that I had terrible testing? No, we don't assume that. My best friend from high school has been very financially successful, and he drives a Porsche. I drive a Volkswagen because I've spent my career in education. I am a way, way better driver than my friend. I can take my Volkswagen on the mountain roads of Vermont and drive that thing like I'm an F1 professional driver. And my friend in his Porsche would probably drive right into the side wall of a mountain because he's a terrible driver. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because the student with the 1560 SAT is not inherently the better student than the one with the 1250. The driver in 500 horsepower is not a better driver than the one in 200 horsepower. And so everything is relative. I would much rather take, the lower score attached to the very high-performing student day in and day out where it counts than the very high score attached to a more mediocre transcript. And so that's beyond just like test optional. I want you to, when we're looking at a student and we're looking at those scores, we're not really looking at just the raw number in a vacuum. We're looking at, this is the valedictorian of the school who's taken every advanced class. And yeah, they're attached to a score if they even chose to submit it at all. That's sort of more middling, but this kid is killing it every day where it matters versus somebody who can take that test and like nothing, get a top 2% score. But if they've got a bunch of B minuses, I'm still not interested, right? And so just nothing exists in a vacuum in this world. The answer is always, it depends on the context, and I think testing is very much the case.
Yeah, I would definitely second that, and everything that you just said, Moses. RIT is certainly test optional. We do our admissions a little bit differently. It's direct entry into our programs. We have 90 different programs in total. So when a student asks me, should I submit my test scores? I say those magic words, it depends. We have an academic profile available online that you can look up. It's divided up into our 9 different colleges, and there's an SAT range of the submitted test scores Now, I'm not a statistics person, but I know that that is a little bit skewed because that is not all of the test scores. So it's the admitted students' test scores if they chose to admit. There are some people lobbying to take that off, but it's a really good indicator of, if you do have a test score in that median range, I would encourage you to put that on your application because it can do nothing but benefit you. However, if you fall below it, we would say leave them off just to give yourself the best chance. But again, it's all circumstantial. Again, you might be taking the SAT or the ACT the day after Halloween and might have not gotten 8 hours of sleep. So it's completely dependent on what the situation is. And again, we're going to be looking at the day-to-day grades at a much closer lens than just the SAT and ACT.
Thank you all. That was really helpful.
All right, well, we went 17 minutes, which was pretty good for not really monitoring the time too much. Just to give you an insight into kind of how Sarah and I, our roles in this building, CVU students have submitted applications to 349 different colleges to date for this school year, which represents about 14,000 total, no, 1,400, excuse me. Need to actually read what's in front of me here. 1,400 applications. Looks like 25% of our students applied ED or EA, which we can get to in the question and answer period. And then just for all of you out there, we are giving the SAT. So we just talked about test optional. We are giving that on March 27th. So we spent some time during the previous slide talking about some essay stuff. So let's move on to the next slide and actually spend some time giving Sam an opportunity to talk about Olive the Horse and essays in general, because I think it's clearly an important part of this process. And you all have some sample essays in front of you to peruse. These are good, fair, Midland, outstanding essays. We're not necessarily going to talk about any specific one and how it was written or things like that, but our reps have all read them and they might want to highlight some pieces. But I, as all my fair bankers know, I certainly have questions. So to the panel, what have been your favorite applicant essays that you've read over the years? What are some of the essays that have stood out? Connor or Sam, I'm going to start on the other side of the table.
Perfect. Nice little snake flow. I like it. My favorite type of essays, I don't have a specific topic or anything. Of course, if it tailors to something that, I dive into, I'm a big sports guy. So if anybody ever writes about golf, I'm reading that word for word, maybe twice over. But for me, I think it's the hook, right? Of any good book, the first chapter, the first line is going to be what makes you come back for it. And one of the 3 essays here is the one about pasta. That just intrigues me. I'd like to see how they relate to that. So anything unique on that note that you can start your essay with and then move it into a meaning or a deeper meaning for yourself is something that I always enjoy reading. We come from a STEM school, so I get a lot of essays about Legos and things like that. I can tell you that I've read a lot of essays about Legos, and it's getting a little worn out. So if you're planning on writing your essay about Legos, more power to you. Just make it as vital and interesting as possible.
I remember the bad ones more than the good ones. I don't know what that says about me, but I will say, students in the room and online, this is your moment to shine, right? You talk about whatever you want. You tell us whatever part of your life story you want to tell us in your voice. It's where we can hear you. So don't let your parents write it, and don't let some, I met a kid once who, when I was a teacher, showed me the first draft of his essay, which was pretty good, and then showed me the final draft of his essay, which was horrendous and overwritten and wordy. And I said, who wrote this? Because I know you didn't. Was it your mom or your dad? No. Somehow like high-priced college counselor type? No. And finally the kid admitted, well, my dad took the first draft and he sent it to the family attorney. And this is what he kind of came back with. This is your opportunity to talk to us, right? You might have a story that we need to know. You might have a life circumstance that you need us to understand. You might be really funny, and you're going to just choose to make us laugh. You might make us cry. All of that is better than just sort of flat, right? If you are New England's #1 equestrian, we're going to know that. So don't write us about how, your best friend is Pickles the horse. I've read that, right? I'd like to tell you about my best friend. She's been my best friend my entire life. I spend my whole weekend with her. I enjoy, being with her and combing her hair and feeding her. You might think my best friend is, Katie from down the road, but she's not. My best friend is Pickles the horse. That we already know that about you. So write to us about something else. Surprise us. Tell us something about you that no other applicant is going to have if you can do that. So if you're, a hockey star, I'm proud of you. That's great. But we're also going to know that. So the essay, like I love hockey and I tore my ACL so I couldn't play hockey. So I picked up air hockey. And then I broke my thumb so I couldn't play that either. So now I play online hockey. Like we got it. You love hockey. But your guidance counselor mentioned that you also have a small business like breeding and selling, albino ferrets. That's different, right? So maybe that's what you want to tell us about, because not a lot of people are going to go down the sort of albino ferret route.
So
right?
Kaylee, my daughter, should write about how she breeds tarantulas.
Oh, no,
If
thank
that's
you.
what she does, I'm
Okay.
sure UVM would be happy to have her. But I think the point I'm trying and failing to make is that you are unique and cool and individual. That's what should be in that essay. Your voice should be in that essay, not a resume regurgitation or a sales pitch or an overly formal, overwritten, piece that reads like a history paper. It's not supposed to be a history paper.
I wish we were snaking the other way. It's always a tough act to follow when it comes to the essay topic. And I think my
Pickles
takeaway.
is always a hard act.
Yeah. My takeaway advice is it's around authenticity. I think I might have said that earlier. The number one mistake I see is students. I see some of it here actually. Is students who I think write the essay trying to think, or figure out what we want to hear, and in doing so, you lose that authenticity. When it comes to what are good topics, and maybe Connor is who mentioned it, but it really is going to depend on who's reading it, and what resonates with each person can be something different. But I think if it's authentic, if it gives us insight into something we don't otherwise know through your activities or through your transcripts or through your counselor recommendations, that's when you are creating something that's advantageous for you. My favorite essay was from a student who was a family of 5. They would come to Vermont skiing. As you know, most ski lifts are quads, and because his family was very introverted and he was extroverted, they used to stick this poor kid on the chair behind him with just random people, and he sort of talked about these just amazingly interesting conversations he would have, getting to know random people, and this sort of skill set he had developed, and learning about people, and then talked about how that skill set would transfer to how he would enter college. And you could just see this kid, joining clubs and organizations and becoming a community leader. And you wanted him to be someone's roommate, to be, president of a club on campus. And, that might have fallen flat with somebody else, but that's, it resonated with me. And it was just his authentic story he was telling about his family and his upbringing and a skill set he had learned, kind of a funny way, and then how it would tie to his experience on the campus. And that was a good essay, I thought.
I'm the youngest in a family of 5, so that would certainly resonate with me too. But I think that gets at, you're writing this one essay that you're submitting to multiple different places. You don't know exactly who's reading it. So just like being true to yourself, and I don't need a recounting of your activities list. I read that elsewhere in your Common App. So just like allowing us to hear your voice. I really like essays about like the little things in life, and it doesn't need to be some like big overarching like I summited Mount Kilimanjaro. I think essays about small things are really powerful because life and college involve a lot of the small things.
That's great. I don't know if I have anything else to really add other than for the most part we're essay optional at Vermont State. So I guess I can speak to submitting an essay that's an essay optional. Do it with really great intention, because by choosing to submit an essay just to submit an essay, that really comes through. I read a lot of, since going essay optional, we read a lot of essays that are like 5 sentences. I want to go to your school. I play hockey. This is what it is. And quite frankly, I wish the student didn't submit an essay, because it doesn't really tell me much about them other than they want to go to our school. They want to play hockey for us. Great. But with also being essay optional, when a student chooses to submit an essay and really puts forth the effort and takes the real time and care, it can really make you pause as a reader, as an applicant reader. I see a lot of notes from our admission counselors that have already gotten to know their students and see their essays and are like, this essay is awesome. And it makes me go back and read how awesome that essay is. And then I highlight that. And then it makes us think like, this student might be worth taking a chance on. If their first couple years of high school were a little bit rocky, but they really took the time, they put in the effort on a good essay, they shared their story, they told us who they are now, where they want to go, how they're going to get there, those kinds of things, that can really enhance a student, and it can really give a reader even more reason to want to take a chance on you. So I would say use the essay as your springboard with intention and get the most of it. Put your time in, start writing early, do multiple drafts, have multiple people look at it. I always say this, if you don't feel like, if you wouldn't want your grandmother to read your essay because the topic feels a little uncomfortable or it's written a little bit too edgy, that you wouldn't want your grandma to read the essay, I probably don't want to read your essay. So like, just kind of keep that in mind as well too when you're thinking about like, who's going to read my essay. A lot of people will read them.
So my favorite essay in all of my years of doing this job was a student who wrote about how she organizes the books in her room. And she doesn't organize them by author, doesn't organize them by series. She isn't a closet librarian with her own little Dewey Decimal System, but she wrote about how she organizes the books based on which main characters would be friends, and then gave examples of why Charlie and Winnie the Pooh are next to each other, and why, Rascalinitz is underneath the bed on the other side of the room. So it's an essay that kind of seems like it's an essay about nothing, but yet told me an awful lot about this student in general, how they think, what they're reading, so many different things in this essay that's not a regurgitation of an activities list or telling somebody what they think they should be saying. So about the essay, I'm going to ask another question, or a couple of them, but just for all of the parents watching, here at CVU we have English composition and writing composition, and students juniors in those classes will have writing their college essay as part of that class. And it shocks Sarah and I every year how many students we come in September and tell us that they're going to rework their college essay. They're going to change it, write another topic because they didn't take it seriously. So you're in a class with a teacher who's going to read your essay, proofread it, tell you whether or not you're writing, what type of essay you're writing. Are you writing the really cool one that doesn't seem like it's about a whole lot of anything but tells somebody a whole lot, or is it this resuscitation of your activities list and they don't take it seriously? And so now they start senior year writing an essay, taking all the time to do all that and balance their AP classes, their sports, all these other things. So we have systems that can really help students kind of manage that essay writing process, not make it over-polished by the family attorney or the college counselor. So you make use of those classes. So I read an essay once that I sent to Moses and a couple other people, and I'm curious, I'm going to ask 2 questions. I'm curious what your thoughts are about risky essays, edgy essays that maybe drop some profanity, and then the big one for us in this building is, can you tell when AI is used in the essay, and what are your thoughts? How do you respond to that when you are pretty sure you're encountering it? So kind of two different questions, and we have 7 minutes, 8 minutes.
I'll jump in and be wicked fast.
Okay.
No, I don't know when AI has written your essay, but I do know when it hasn't. And what I mean by that is AI can write a pretty good essay. I don't think it's personal to you. So my honest answer is I don't always know. But when it is personal to you, when it sounds like you, when it is telling a story that only you can tell, then I definitely know that you really did write it. And then I would also, just going to throw in, and then I'm going to be done, the essay is always about you, even if it is on the surface about something else. If you look at essay on page 3, the one that's about pasta, I don't love it, but it's sort of a pasta metaphor that's about the kid. If you look at the one on page 4, it is really almost entirely about the darn blanket. I don't learn anything about the owner of the blanket. I just learn about the blanket. I don't want to admit the blanket to my school. So if you're going to write in a metaphoric way, I think that's great, but make sure it's always about you. In my real life, I love profanity. I use it extensively. I have very colorful language. I'm going to stick with it. I don't know that it's banned from an essay if it's important, if it's part of dialogue that you're recreating, if it's the only verb or adjective that you could possibly use. But if it's gratuitous and just feels like you're showing off a little bit, then that can be a turn off. And the last thing, I'm gonna, Grandma Brandon and I are good friends, but we might disagree a little bit because there are essay topics that actually students, they might need to tell us some things that would not be appropriate for Grandma, but they still might need to tell us about their lives or their families. But there are some topics, like your essay should be about one of the most interesting things about you, right? If the most interesting thing about you is, that you made out with your significant other in the backseat of the car, like, no, that you got to have a better story than that. And if you don't, go live some more and get a better story first. Sorry.
You're good. That's why we have you here. Risky essays.
Yeah,
Can you tell about AI?
So not much really to add on either front. I mean, no, and certainly not in such a way where I could hang my hat and deny a person because of it. I think you miss an opportunity. It's, as we've all just said, this is an opportunity. I know it's a pain, but to leave that up to AI is a missed opportunity. And to Sam's point, those authentic, genuine essays, those shine through for a reason. As far as, again, like Sam and my staff would laugh, I don't have the best mouth, but I think that the college essay seems overly risky to use curse words or to have sort of uncomfortable or controversial topics, unless, again, it's really, really important. And you can probably get that advice from the school counselors, and whether or not this really needs to be written in this way, or this information really has to be in there. Again, I don't get offended by the F word, but there could be people on the committee that are. And so you never know who's reading it, how many people, what their backgrounds are comfortable, how comfortable they are with that type of language. And it just seems like an unnecessary risk to me.
Yeah, I'll be brief for the sake of time. I don't mind profanity in my life in general, but there better be a pretty good reason that you are swearing in your essay if you are going to. And there better not be like a different word you could have chosen instead to convey the same meaning. Because I know while I maybe don't mind it, my boss, for one, is not a fan. So I think there's a risk you're taking with there, and it should be worth the risk if you're going for it.
And I'm asking the question because I don't know about Sarah, but every year I receive drafts of essays where students have chosen to use profanity as part of their essay, and I usually strike it out. Like, I just don't think it's necessary. I think, what is it my father says? I quote my father a lot. Cursing is the crutch of a conversational, and then he uses some other inappropriate term. But it's very alliterative. So we've got 12 minutes on this topic. I think we have talked about the essay a lot. I'm conscious of time. We have about 10 minutes remaining. I think Gary's going to, based on the YouTube feed, need to shut us down at 7 o'clock. He'll tell me if we don't have to. Do we want to do transcripts or letters next? I think we should do transcripts next. That sound good? All right. So the next slide, Gary, is transcripts. We have sample letters in the packet. I think what I'm going to say about the letter is make sure you're working with the teacher that you're asking for the letter. Don't send 28 letters of recommendation. These guys will maybe read 28 letters of recommendation, but are those 28 letters going to each say something different about you? If Middlebury wants 2 letters, send 2 letters. If UVM wants 1, send 1, maybe 2. Don't overtax your admissions readers. All right, Sarah, you're doing
All right.
transcripts?
Yeah, so moving on to the topic of transcripts. I'm going to ask the panel, how would you define a rigorous course load in high school and how that meshes with appropriately challenging yourself? And I guess like kind of as part of that is more always better. So again, how would you define a rigorous course load in high school and how that meshes with appropriately challenging yourself is more always better?
I can start.
All right, Connor, go ahead.
I think, again, it comes back to those 2 magic words, it depends. If you're a student that has a million different things going on outside of the classroom and you're involved and you have a job and you're the #1 equestrian in New England, you're going to have commitments outside of school, and you may not want to stress yourself out or stretch yourself out so thin that you're not performing well in the classroom. If you can do that and you can manage everything and still succeed academically, then more power to you. Take as many of those rigorous courses that your school can offer. But if you're a student that has a lot on their plate already, we're going to see that on the application and understand that 18 or 12 APs throughout junior and senior year might have not been the most intelligent thing for you to do. So again, it comes down to your circumstance. From our standpoint here at RIT, we're more focused on the performance in the content courses for the grades and programs that you're applying to. For example, this is how we review our applications. If you're a student that is applying to our College of Art and Design and you have C's in your studio art classes, but you have A's and B's in your math and science, we're going to ask why, where is the disconnect here? Why are you interested in art when you're clearly excelling in things like biology, chemistry, or physics? So I would say pick and choose your battles. If you know you're going to succeed in those rigorous courses, take that chance.
Anyone else?
It's pretty spot on. We read very holistically at Vermont State. We are, being a public institution, we are very much in the philosophy of access and providing students with a chance. Our acceptance rate is around 90% for overall university. Some of our programs are closer to like 50%. Some of our very selective and capped programs, but for the most part, we're a 90% acceptance rate school. So, when I was looking at the packet and looking at all of these transcripts, they all would be admitted to Vermont State, quite frankly. But there's some things on them that stand out to me. In the first transcript here, I see junior grades. This student took AP. I also see they took a UVM business savvy course, and they did well in them, and that's fantastic. Those things are what I see those are as transferable credit, which means that maybe the student, when they come to Vermont State, will have a little bit more elective time. They might be able to engage in a minor. They might be able to add a double major. That is something that I think is great. And then on the last transcript, I was just looking over, this student looks like they challenged themselves. And I'm going to assume that this is a final transcript, but I'll say, just for the case of the exercise here, maybe this student waited until they graduated to send us grades. And I think for this student, it's a pretty good decision to wait, because looks like senior year, they really turned it on. Their grades progressed. They took a CCV course. They got a B in that, which is great. Another transferable credit. Looks like junior year, they started to, take a more academically rigorous, a little bit more challenging schedule as well. And they, struggled in some courses, but they persisted and they continued to do well. So while this student isn't a straight A student, they've shown growth, they've shown persistence, and I think that this candidate is a strong candidate as well, too. So when we look at the transcript, again, we're not just looking at just your junior grades, just your, your sophomore and your freshman grades, but we're looking holistically. And we're looking at you at the time that you submit your application. And senior year can be a pivotal moment. Junior year can be a pivotal moment. You all are getting ready or you've started your second semester. So think about the classes that you're taking. How can you, continue to show that you're working hard and increasing if you need to, or staying consistent. That's what we're looking for.
I don't want to miss the opportunity because I have noticed sort of a troubling trend in Vermont that speaks to some of this that I want to kind of touch on. And so, there are sort of 5 core academic areas in high school. So you have math, you have science, you have world language, you have English, you have social science. There are 4 years that, for the most part, make up high school, and I expect to see 5 core academic courses for the most part over 4 years. And, I think it's important to challenge yourselves as much as possible in areas where you have a strength. So if you're not strong in math, I don't expect you to take calculus, and you're probably not going to be applying to a major that would require a foundational knowledge of calculus, but I do expect you to have a senior year math. Senior year isn't, late arrival, English class, personal learning plan, asynchronous online classes, CCB, and then I'm out early. You're missing the opportunity of a 4-year high school career to prepare yourself for the rigor of the academic coursework at the college that you want to go to. And every college is going to be different, but I'm seeing more and more students who are taking a path, particular senior year, that is not academically rigorous. Students that don't have Algebra 2. You literally cannot be considered for admission at the University of Vermont without it. Students who have never taken a chemistry class, and yet they think they're going to be a nursing student. So, there are courses that we require, there are courses that we want to see, and there are courses that will make you competitive at selective institutions. And you have to think about that. And so again, is more better? No. I don't expect you to take AP Calc if you're not good at math. I don't expect you to max out on your AP courses if you don't think you can pull it off. But I expect you to do 4 years of high school and 5 core academic areas.
Sam, you're shaking your head. Are you going to add?
Nope, I'm going to save time.
Okay. So
Everything he said.
the one thing that Sarah told me not to talk about, I'm going to talk about, which is we just finished ad drop. And every single year, we have seniors coming to us at the start of semester 2 wanting to drop core academic classes. You've heard from every one of these folks, whether you're here in person or online, the message is clear. Finish what you start. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're going to sign up for classes at the end of your junior year, then those are the classes that you finish in your senior year. It shouldn't be about, I got into UVM or Middlebury, now I'm going to drop this class. Because my response, and I say it every year, and every year I get pushback from students, is I'm not letting you drop that class until you check with the schools that you've been admitted to or applied to, because it can impact an admissions decision. I've actually had students submit a final transcript. I've submitted the final transcript to a school, not represented here, and that school sent the student a letter, formal letter over the summer. We expected you to finish X class. It's not on your transcript. You are not allowed to matriculate in the fall unless you show us this class. The student had to do the class over the summer. So schools are, this is really important. I'm on the UVM admissions advisory board, and this is something Moses talks about all the time. It's making sure that it's the 5 core areas all year long, or all 4 years.
And I think when you're creating your schedule for next year, being really mindful and thoughtful about what you are going to take, really talking with your counselor about those courses, and then once you start, kind of following through.
All right, I'm noticing that it's almost 7 o'clock. Are we good to keep going for a little bit? Are there questions from, I'm going to turn on the YouTube feed, which I don't know if I dare do, because I'll get to see myself. I don't know if I want to do that. Are there questions from either audience? Which just seems weird to say. Yeah.
I wanted to, say, I'm already in a trade school. How would that affect my college application?
Are you asking me or?
It, I think it depends on what your goals are. If you don't mind me asking, what trade program are you in right now?
I'm in the Vermont State Tech Center aviation maintenance.
Awesome. Are you thinking about going into aviation maintenance? Something aviation related. I think that's great then. The fact that you've gotten to get this exposure early, the fact that you can see kind of in a little bit of a low stakes environment, right? Like, do I like the world of aviation and do I want to stick with this is fantastic. I think if you told me that you were interested in going into nursing or going on to medical school, I might say, okay, what else have you taken outside of your Burlington Tech rigor? We know Burlington Tech really well. We know that it's a very academically rigorous program. Actually, it's cool that you're in that program because that is one. We have a program that directly relates, but anyway, that's not what we're talking about. But I think so if you were to tell me that, I would say, what else are you taking? Can you take a community college course to show that you've got chemistry, that you've got anatomy and physiology, that you've got a lab bio? Going to the tech centers is fantastic because it really gives you an opportunity to be specialized. Many colleges and universities recognize that there's a lot of academic rigor there, but it can be really challenging to sometimes tease out exactly what those areas of academic rigor. For example, sometimes it's hard to get an Algebra 2 in, right? And it's not necessarily going to be reflected on your transcript. So I would say as a junior, what I would start doing is reaching out to colleges and universities that you might have interest in and sharing. This is what I'm doing right now. How do you view that? What do you think of that? In most cases, if you're looking at something directly related to it, it's probably going to correlate. A lot of the time I see applicants who are interested in cosmetology and then they apply to a nursing program, or they are interested in culinary and then they apply to an engineering program. And while, I know there's math in the culinary program and I know there's math and sciences in the cosmetology programs, it's not always the direct relation and it's not always the rigor. And the reason I bring up engineering, the reason I bring up nursing is because those are programs with very little seat capacity. So they become very selective. And when you're already looking at a pool that's, really strong, has AP and things like that, it can be challenging for an admissions committee to tease out exactly what rigor you've done.
Anybody adding anything else? Other questions? Yes.
Hold on for the mic here for the online audience. There you go.
Hello. Hello.
Oh, here you go. We got you.
Okay. If I transferred to CVU and my old school had different math programs, and then I transferred into a higher level of math, so I didn't do Algebra 2 here, so it wouldn't be on my CVU transcript, is that a problem?
We'll get all your transcripts, and so if you had it in a former life, we'll see it. That's also the kind of thing, without knowing the details of your situation, that's the kind of thing that your school counselor and or you yourself can just address in the application, right? So in the Common App, there's a section underneath the main essay, which is just an open text box where you can put anything you want. That's a great spot for, I transferred in the middle of high school. I came from a school that, all we did was knit, so I had no math. So they placed me in some weird math, when I got to CVU. I actually love math, but because I was sort of behind from the knitting school, that's why I only got to addition. Like whatever your situation is, just go ahead and explain it. And I think the general rule of thumb is if there's any kind of, I don't want to call it an abnormality, but if there's any kind of bump in the road, good or bad, that you feel like you just need to address to help us understand your life story, then just put it in writing and we'll figure it out.
The important thing is working with your school counselor here.
Yep.
Whether that's Rye, me, Sarah, Naomi, we'll all help you navigate some of that stuff.
The other thing too is every school is different in the state of Vermont, but then also across the country and the world. And some schools, their math is a different, they call it something different, right? They don't call it Algebra 1, 2, geometry, calc, right? They have it in, different, New York, they call it Regents math. They have different things like that. And it's up to the admissions committee to decipher what that all means. You know, and we do a pretty good job of that, I think, of making sure that, you know, we can figure out what you've done and how prepared you are to be successful with us.
Yeah, like I know Mount Mansfield calls it like Math 1, Math 2, and Math 3. So if you were in like, and I know in the Mount Mansfield context what that means. And if I have a question about it that you didn't answer for me in your application, I will reach out and try to someone and try to get the information so that I know what that means. But if you're in Math 2 and then you transfer here to CVU and are in pre-calculus, I have a guess that you know the foundations of Algebra 2. It's hard to do well in pre-calculus if you don't know Algebra 2.
I'm just glad I
And
didn't go to
that's
CVU.
our language at RIT as well, is again, our main tool with admissions and answering these types of questions is the academic profile. And to go off of that, if you have 2 years of math and you transfer and you end up taking pre-calc, it comes down to what those math courses before equate to and what we can determine, you know, you've mastered or you've studied. And then if you've taken pre-calc, oftentimes we will say 3 years of math required or 4 years of math required for this program. And then we'll put in parentheses up through pre-calc or up through calculus, or calculus is preferred. So again, it's all circumstantial, but as long as you have 3 to 4 years of math or science or whatever the prerequisite may be, we're going to take a look into that and dive deeper, and we'll reach out if we have questions.
I'm just glad I didn't go to the knitting school. It would not have gone well. Other questions? I'm not seeing any questions from online. A bunch of people watching.
Other audience questions?
All right.
I want to compliment you that the questions came from students.
Mm-hmm.
That is rarer than you might think. We do a lot of this, and usually parents are the first hands up, and your poor children never get a word in edgewise. So thank you to you two students for being the ones to ask questions. Oh, look, I inspired another one.
It's a bit more specific. What are all of your business programs like?
So the
Yeah.
question was to the panel, what are the business programs like?
I'll tell you this. Our business program is the best business program that's out there. I don't know what
Hey, I'm going to step back.
I don't know what my fellow panelists would say either, but you know, for the right student, it's the best business program out there. But all kidding aside, it's, you know, our business program is pretty comprehensive. It covers everything from management to accounting to entrepreneurship. There's a lot of different concentrations within it. I joke with that answer because, you know, when we're at college fairs, that's like a very common question to get is, what's your X program like? And in my opinion, my business program is the best business program out there. But is that truly the best business program out there? I don't know. But I think what students really like about our program is the ability for professors to work really closely with their professors. Many of our professors are retired professionals who have either worked as HR managers, worked in corporate offices, started their own business, and then retired and gone on to teach. And a lot of our students really value that. A lot of our students also really enjoy the fact that our business program is pretty flexible in the fact that you can do it both in person, you can do it online. There's a lot of different modalities to it, which can also be confusing as well. And but really great for the right student. So
I think ours is great. It's our most popular major on campus, but I think this goes for any major. The best school for you for that major is whatever is the best fit for you in general, because you won't succeed as well academically no matter how great that program is if you aren't also succeeding outside of the classroom.
We have the second best business school. No,
at least you're honest.
Yeah. Grossman School of Business, named endowed business school, has a extensive co-op program that just had a $15 million gift. Students participate in international case competitions. A little plug for the Vermont Pitch Competition, which is a pitch competition for high school students where you can win cash prizes, free tuition for 4 years, very popular for business-minded entrepreneurial high school students. So it's like Vermont State, UVM, Wharton School of Business, I think is the order.
Here's my 30-second pitch for the liberal arts. Middlebury does not have a business school, but economics is the most popular major. 18% of our graduates end up in finance, another 8% in management consulting. You can still do very well in that world. There have been studies about, right out of college, business majors tend to make more money than non-business majors, but if you look 10 years into a career, actually liberal arts educated students are the ones who are in charge of those corporations more than the people who, got a specific degree in, tax accounting for veterinarians. So, I think it depends on what you want to do. If you have a specific outcome, a straight up business school can be great. If you have perhaps a wider lens on what you might want to do in the sort of business/professional world, don't discount a liberal arts college, actually. You'd be surprised at what the outcomes might be.
Connor?
Yeah, being a Institute of Technology, quite literally in our name, you may think that our business school is not as strong as it could be. That's furthest from the truth, though. A lot of our programs, finance, accounting, they like to leak into the STEM programs and work side to side with them. A really good example of this is, we call it our Tiger Tank, like Shark Tank. Students collaborate with students from other programs for cash prizes at each year in the second semester. But really what attracts students to that business program here at RIT is the co-op program. We're number 5 in the country with our co-op program. It's actually a graduation requirement. We worked with over 2,000 employers. So you'll be doing that over the summer between your sophomore and junior year, as well as your junior and senior year, working with a company and more likely than not having a job opportunity or an offer on the table before you walk the stage at graduation. So regardless of the program, whether it's business, liberal arts, engineering, computing sciences, that's what we're preparing you for, is life after college and setting yourself up for the best possible start.
I think the way I'm going to close this is I think you're at a point in time where all of your house counselors are waiting to meet with you to talk about how do you start the search process, how do you organize a campus tour, what kinds of questions you ask, and we're here talking about starting the process. I think interviewing the schools in person, getting on campus, I've had students tell me stories about looking at schools where they really only saw the tops of their shoes because it was pouring rain, but the campus just felt like home. I went to Castleton with my father in the middle of February and had no desire to go there. I wanted to go to Towson or a couple other schools that had accepted me, and Castleton just felt like the place that I needed to be. Cold, it was snowing, it was not a nice time to go visit schools. But that's where my 960 SAT score landed. By the time I graduated, I published in an international journal. I'd done all of these cool things because I'd had a chance to interview schools, ask questions, meet professors, talk to students. And that's what you have an opportunity to start doing now. That's when you're going to find the best business program. They all have great business programs, but none of them might be the best one for you. All right? Yes.
I know you mentioned that world language is like one of the top core subjects, but how does that get weighted on?
Yeah, I feel compelled because that is, so the question is about world language being one of the 5 core academic areas. It's also, a subject area where oftentimes students may have an exemption from taking it in high school. So that is the one area, I would say, where there's quite a bit of flexibility as far as how much you take it. Again, I like to see it for 5 years for students who can do it well, or for 4 years. Oftentimes students start it in middle school and go through 5 years. But rest assured, I don't want to scare you. That is one subject area where it is not uncommon to admit a student who's through French 3 who otherwise looks exceptional. That's my mistake.
Another excellent student question. We have more students, more questions, or are we good? All right, we've kept everybody 15 minutes longer. The YouTube feed, I don't know if it's expired. I don't know what's going on there in the virtual world. That's Gary's land. I want to thank everybody for coming, panelists, presenter, or audience members, students. You guys were awesome. I expect this from you guys. You're just fantastic every time we have conversations like this. Thank you again, and drive safe.
Thank you.
You.